Hello everyone, I am Aditi Arora from ABES Engineering College, Ghaziabad. In today's video lecture, we will be continuing the second lecture from the unit Process Synchronization. So the outline of today's lecture will be, first of all, we will understand the concept of critical section, then critical section problem, and lastly, we will discuss that whatever solution we formulate for the critical section problem, that solution need to fulfill some basic requirements. Then, so we will study about those requirements. Now, let us understand first what is the meaning of critical section. Let us say we have some processes, like let us say we have n processes, that is P0, P1, P2, P3, so on up to Pn. Now, each process has a segment of code called as critical section, in which the process may be changing some common variables, writing a file, manipulating a table, etc. Like say, for example, we have a process P0, P1, and so on up to Pn. Now, all these processes have a common segment of code, that is critical section. In this segment of code, all these processes can do their manipulations. They can use some shared variables, update the shared variables. They can update some table, they can update some file, append a file. All these things they can do in this segment of code that is called as critical section. But the condition is that when one process is executing in its critical section, then no other process can execute in the critical section. Means the use of critical section should be mutually exclusive. What do you mean by mutually exclusive? Means when one process is currently executing in its critical section, then no other process can be allowed to enter and execute the critical section. So no two processes are executing in their critical sections at the same time. This is very important. So now we can understand that what is a critical section problem. It is a problem to design a protocol or a rule that the processes can use to cooperate. So basically, we all know that those processes that have something in common, that share the memory, are called as cooperating processes. Now, how we will synchronize these cooperating processes so that the data consistency can be achieved? This we can achieve through the concept of critical section. Now, which process will get the critical section and how we will avoid other processes to enter the critical section? Now, this is called as the critical section problem. That means how we will manage this critical section. We will manage this critical section by designing a protocol so that the processes can use it to cooperate with each other. Now, this is the basic structure of critical section that we will be studying. So, first of all, there is an entry section. Whenever a process wants to access or wants to execute in its critical section, then that process first need to have the permission to access its critical section, and this permission will be granted in the entry section. Basically, it is a program code. So the entry section code, it is written in such a way that through entry section, each process can request the permission to enter its critical section. Okay, whenever a process want to access the critical section, first of all, it needs to execute the entry section where it will get the permission to enter into the critical section. Once a process gets the permission to enter the critical section, it executes its statements, its work, its manipulation, whatever it want to do with the shared variables. The process can do all these things in the critical section. And once it is finished with its work in the critical section, it comes into the next section that is called as exit section, right? So Exit section basically defines that whenever the process releases comes out of the critical sections, the other process should know about this so that the other processes can now enter the critical section. So basically exit section में जब भी process आएगा तो इससे बाकी processes को ये पता चलेगा that now the critical section is available. Any other process can request for the permission to enter into the critical section. The remaining section is basically the non-critical section area where some general instructions are written like printf, scanf instructions are written here. So this is the very important structure when we understand the concept of critical section problem. There are some rules written that each process must request permission to enter its critical section. Without permission, no process can enter the critical section. The section of code implementing this request will be एंट्री सेक्शन. सो जो परमिशन का जो भी कोड एग्जीक्यूट होगा वो एंट्री सेक्शन में लिखा होगा. ठीक है. एंड देन क्रिटिकल सेक्शन इज फॉलोड बाय द exit section where other processes will come to know that now the critical section is available for execution. They can take the permission to enter into the critical section. Earlier process has exited the critical section. And finally, the remaining code is written in the remaining section, which is a non-critical area. The next topic is solution to critical section problem. What do you mean by that? Now we have already understood that what is critical section problem. So जो भी हम कोई solution formulate करेंगे critical section problem के लिए, उस solution के लिए जरूरी है कि वो पहले 3 requirements को फुलफिल करें. वो कौन कौन सी रिक्वायरमेंट्स है? सबसे पहली है आपकी म्यूचुअल एक्सक्लूजन, दूसरी है आपकी प्रोग्रेस एंड थर्ड है आपकी बाउंडेड वेटिंग. हम वन बाय वन इन रिक्वायरमेंट्स को समझेंगे. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, व्हाट इज म्यूचुअल एक्सक्लूजन? इफ प्रोसेस पीआई इज एग्जीक्यूटिंग इन इट्स क्रिटिकल सेक्शन, देन नो अदर प्रोसेस कैन बी एग्जीक्यूटिंग इन देयर क्रिटिकल सेक्शन. हमने अभी पढ़ा कि क्रिटिकल सेक्शन बेसिकली एक वो पीस ऑफ कोड है जहां पर जो कॉपरेटिव प्रोसेसेस हैं वो कुछ मैनिपुलेशंस करते हैं. तो मैनिपुलेशंस जो है वो कंसिस्टेंट रहें, इसके लिए जरूरी है कि एक टाइम पर एक ही प्रोसेस क्रिटिकल सेक्शन में एग्जीक्यूट हो और कोई भी दूसरा प्रोसेस अगर सेम टाइम पर क्रिटिकल सेक्शन को एक्सेस करना चाहता है तो उसे क्रिटिकल सेक्शन का एक्सेस ना मिले. सो दिस कॉन्सेप्ट इज कॉल्ड एज म्यूचुअल एक्सक्लूजन. से फॉर एग्जाम्पल हम रिसोर्स लेते हैं प्रिंटर की. अगर हम बात करें तो प्रिंटर एक म्यूचुअली एक्सक्लूसिव रिसोर्स है जिसमें कि एक टाइम पर एक ही प्रोसेस, एक ही यूजर जो है प्रिंटर को एक्सेस कर सकता है एंड दे कैन गेट देयर प्रिंट आउट्स. Next is the progress. What do you mean by progress? If no process is executing in the critical section and some process wish to enter the critical section, then only those processes that are not executing in their remainder section can participate in deciding which will enter the critical section next. हमने अभी डिस्कस किया कि सबसे पहले हमारे पास होता है entry section, then we have critical section, then we have the exit section, and then we have lastly we have the remainder section. Now प्रोग्रेस सेज दैट कि अगर क्रिटिकल सेक्शन में फिलहाल कोई भी प्रोसेस नहीं है लेकिन कुछ प्रोसेस ऐसे हैं जो क्रिटिकल सेक्शन में आना चाहते हैं, दे वांट द परमिशन टू एंटर द क्रिटिकल सेक्शन, दैट मीन्स किसी ना किसी प्रोसेस को क्रिटिकल सेक्शन जरूर अलाउ कर देना चाहिए. एंड ये डिसीजन कौन लेगा? ये वो प्रोसेस लेंगे जो एंट्री सेक्शन में क्रिटिकल सेक्शन की रिक्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं. उनमें से किसी भी एक प्रोसेस को सिलेक्ट किया जाएगा और क्रिटिकल सेक्शन उसे असाइन कर दिया जाएगा. मीन्स द क्रिटिकल सेक्शन will always be granted to some or the other process. It will not remain idle. Third is the bounded waiting. Now, there exists a bound or a limit on the number of times that other processes are allowed to enter in the critical section after a process has made a request to enter its critical section and before that request is granted. It means that if more than one processes are trying to enter into the critical section, and if one process gets the chance to enter into its critical section, then it doesn't mean that this process can be repeatedly allowed to enter the critical section while other processes are not getting the critical section even for the first time. There should be a bound, there should be a limit on every process on the number of times it can enter the critical section while other processes are also requesting for the critical सेक्शन. हर किसी प्रोसेस को जो है फेयर चांस मिलना चाहिए क्रिटिकल सेक्शन में एंटर करने का इफ द पर्टिकुलर प्रोसेस हैज रिक्वेस्टेड फॉर द परमिशन टू एंटर इनटू द critical section. So these are the three very important requirements that any solution that we formulate for the critical section problem needs to address and needs to fulfill. These are the references from where we have prepared today's video lecture content. Thank you.